Me say, as I've always said, and I will always continue to say, that riots are socially destructive and self-defeating. I'm still convinced that non-violence is the most potent weapon available to oppress people in their struggle for freedom and justice. I feel that violence will only create more social problems than they will solve. That in a real sense it is impractical for the Negro to even think of mounting a violent revolution in the United States. So I will continue to condemn riots and continue to say to my brothers and sisters that this is not the way. Continue to affirm that there is another way. But at the same time, it is as necessary for me to be as vigorous in condemning the conditions which cause persons to feel that they must engage in riotous activities as it is for me to condemn riots. I think America must see that riots do not develop out of thin air. Certain conditions continue to exist in our society, which must be condemned as vigorously as we condemn riots. But in the final analysis, a riot is the language of the unheard. What is it that America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the plight of the Negro poor has worsened over the last few years. It has failed to hear that the promises of freedom and justice have not been met, and it has failed to hear that large segments of white society are more concerned about tranquility and the status quo than about justice, equality, and humanity. And so in a real sense, our nation's summers of riots are caused by our nation's winters of delay. And as long as America postpones justice, we stand in the position of having these recurrences of violence and riots over and over again. Social justice and progress are the absolute guarantors of riot prevention.
I've left this full speech in because I think quite a lot of people tend to misquote it and misuse it, especially in the current state of the world as it is today. I didn't upload this podcast last week, specifically because the matters were so heated, and someone like me doesn't have a right to really be angry, so to speak. It's really easy for me to sit here and preach to all of you a message of acceptance, a message of understanding one another. This whole podcast is based off of understanding, learning, and experiencing other cultures, other philosophies, other mythologies, other religions, other practices. And I would not be able to do this without the help of all of you guys, my supporters. And I would not be able to do this without being able to talk to others about situations like this. As I'm sure you're all aware of, and if you haven't, you should go back and watch it, because it's still up on my YouTube, and it always will be. I did a podcast with a guy called Hellbound Heathen on YouTube, and in it we discussed how there was a man who was a KKK member who relinquished his hood and gave it up to a black man because he ended up developing a friendship with that man. And because he developed a friendship with that man, his hatred towards black people started to dissipate. As I've said earlier, it is really easy for me to preach about all of these things. But it is not easy for someone who isn't in my situation, who isn't in my position, to preach about these things. It isn't easy for the average, everyday African American in America to practice and do these kinds of things, because there's always a risk that someone's going to hate them based off of the color of their skin. Moonlight Madness is not about segregation. It's not about anything to do with that. Moonlight Madness is meant for everyone, regardless of race, sex, religion, spiritual beliefs, philosophical beliefs, sexuality, and anything in between. I've left a link down in the description below. It's for something known as Campaign Zero, and I think it is a charity that can definitely help out in this kind of situation. Just understand that no matter what position you're in, no matter where you are, especially in the current state of the world as it is, especially if you live in America, that there's a difference between those who want to riot for the sake of rioting and those that are there to protest for something that they are genuinely passionate about and something that they genuinely think is an issue. As Martin Luther King said, rioting is the language of the unheard of. These people who are rioting, these people who are seen as rioting, are only doing so because there is an unsolved issue in the state of America as it is. So, I think we need to be a little bit more compassionate towards our fellow man, towards our fellow brethren. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, white, Asian, black, and whatnot. We need to support one another in these trying times, especially since we are just now coming out of a quarantine, or especially since we are now coming out of a pandemic. We need to learn from one another and learn to treat one another right. If we don't learn from one another, history is doomed to repeat itself. I want to share with you the author's note from this book I picked up back in February called Children of Blood and Bone. The author is Tomi Adeyemi, and I really love her story. Spoilers, by the way, since this is the author's note in it, she puts names of her characters in it as well, so spoilers. But I am going to read it out, because I think it's important to read this one out. Children of Blood and Bone was written during a time where I kept turning on the news and seeing stories of unarmed black men, women, and children being shot by the police. I felt afraid and angry and helpless, but this book was the one thing that made me feel like I could do something about it. I told myself that if just one person could read it and have their hearts or mind changed, that I would have done something meaningful against a problem that often feels so much bigger than myself. Now this book exists, and you are reading it. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. But if this story affected you in any way, all I ask is that you don't let it stop within the pages of this text. If you cried for Zuleika and Salim, cry for innocent children like Jordan Edwards, Tamir Rice, and Diana Stanley Jones. They are 15, 12, and 7 when they were shot and killed by police. If your heart broke for Zaylee's grief over the death of her mother, then let it break for all the survivors of police brutality who have had to witness their loved ones taken firsthand. Survivors like Diamond Reynolds and her 4-year-old daughter, who were in the car when Philando Castile was pulled over, shot, and killed. Geronimo Yanez, the officer who killed him, was acquitted with all charges. These are just a few names in a long list of black lives taken too soon. Mothers ripped from daughters, fathers ripped from sons, and parents who will live the rest of their lives with a grief no parent should have to know. This is just one of many problems plaguing our world, and there are so many days when these problems still feel bigger than us. But let this book be proof to you that we can always do something to fight back. And just like Zaylee and Amari, we have the power to change the evils in the world. We've been knocked down for far too long. Now, let's rise. Now, I think we can finally start and begin with the podcast. But first of all, I record these podcasts every Monday, and I upload them every Tuesday. So I want to say to those who practice the voodoo religion or the Orisha faith, you should make your offerings today to either Papa Legba or Alegua, because this is their day. This is the day you are supposed to make their offerings. Now, hello everyone, and welcome back to Moonlight Madness. And today, I am joined by fellow Breaking Bad fan, the Eggman. Now, the question is, did you bring dipping sticks?
I brought dipping sticks.
So, anyway, as I had mentioned in the intro before, I'm wanting to talk about all the kind of shit that's going on in the world right now. It's a scary place. As the Buddha says, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. And my friend here, the Eggman, is relatively close to the area where all these protests and riots began. So why don't you talk to us a bit about that and how you feel about these kinds of things?
Well, to be honest, I don't really want to give too much of an opinion to avoid anything too bad.
Yeah.
I was kind of worried about it because I had some family, and obviously,
Yeah.
it can be concerning. What else? I was also somewhat concerned. I was kind of concerned that since we were so close, if it were to spread greatly, it would come here really fast.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really. I had nothing against it. I was just concerned about the whole looting fact.
Yeah. Surprisingly, a lot of people might think that it's the Black Lives Matter movement that is doing the looting, but it, for the most part, isn't. It's just a bunch of people trying to take advantage of the situation amongst all the chaos.
Right.
Because, I mean, if you think about it, here and now, we're going through a quarantine, or we're just coming out of a pandemic, right? These people are sitting here jobless in their house all day long, and there's a system that's not doing anything about it. There's a system that's not even helping people out during this whole chaos. So they needed an excuse to go out there and actually riot in the first place and loot in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Whether they actually believed in the movement or not, I think.
Yeah. And as Martin Luther King once said, hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Why these riots are happening in the first place is because of, well, outrage. You know, as I said to everyone at the beginning of this recording, the reason why a lot of these riots are happening in the first place is because there's a system in place that is not being changed, and the voices of these people who need the system to be changed, you know, a lot of the people who are in the Black Lives Matter movement need the system to change, and they're not getting that, especially not from the government themselves. So they just have to do something to get their message out. I'm not saying it's right. I don't believe in rioting, but I I think protests are fine. If it's a peaceful protest, a peaceful gathering, people are out there, genuinely talking about something that they feel is something they feel is a social issue that needs to be sorted, then I'm fine with that. It's whenever people start to take advantage of each other and
Yeah.
fight each other amongst all the chaos.
Yep.
It's essentially like how can we as humans express peace with one another? One door closes and then another one opens, right?
Mm.
And,
Yeah.
and one of the most surprising things is that the Amish are actually going out and were actually going out and helping to clean up the city, which
That was nice of them.
that's a very surprising thing considering how the Amish are against a lot of modern technologies.
Yeah.
It, it's just a
That's how
weird.
you know that's how you know this is important for all different kind of people.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what race, religion, sex, or anything you are. People are out there. People are out there actually trying to help amidst all this chaos. And that's something I think a lot of people forget about. The news always shows us these violent atrocities happening in the world. The news always wants to show us the terribleness of the world. They don't want to show us the good that's happening in the world. They don't want to show us good people out there. They want to focus on what gets them views, and what gets them views is public outrage.
Yeah. They
They're,
kind of benefit off.
huh?
They kind of benefit off all this. Let's just say chaos. Yeah.
And it isn't just Minneapolis. It's all over America now. People are protesting.
Oh yeah.
I have a friend up in Denver, and she's told me that the riots up there are actually relatively riots. Why did I say right? No. The protests there are relatively peaceful for the most part. I've friends on the West Coast, and apparently there's a curfew that's been enacted in some of the places in the West Coast because of they don't want what happened in Minneapolis to happen there. So a protest was put. A curfew was put into place for the protesters and for everyone to stay in their houses. Just to prevent all the chaos from happening. Now, even down from where I was from before I moved countries, down in Houston in Texas, there are protests happening there.
Yeah.
I think there are people out there who also forget that the police, as bad as the ones that we see in the news are, and as much as there are terrible cops out there, some people say we're lucky to live in a world where we have smartphones so that people can actually record abuse of authority from polices, especially against people who are black. They're the main people that are always racially profiled because they can't help the color of their skin, and because you have a racist cop, they're going to be targeted more often by racist cops. But there's also a lot of undocumented, unreported, abuse towards the African American community, that just goes unseen. And then at the same time, there are polices out there who do want to help out the local community. I saw like I saw a video online of I don't know where it was in America, but it was where these people were protesting, right? And the cops said, one of the cops said, we put down our batons, we've taken off our helmets. We want to help you. We want this protest to be a parade. So everyone gather up and stuff like that. So there are cops out there that are helping out. But at the same time, we cannot ignore the issue that there is definitely an abuse of authority. You know, actually, a friend of mine told me that it takes about 3 weeks for no wait. It takes a cop during their training 1 week to learn how to properly use their firearms, compared to the 4-week training course. So, if you think about that, it's such a short amount of time to learn how to de-escalate a situation and then, you know, handle a firearm as well.
Yeah. One huge comparison I've seen is how people talk about how barbers have more training hours. It was something like they spend more hours training than police do, barbers.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was just out of context. Like, I feel like it might have been out of context a bit. Like, there was some other stuff as well, but yeah.
So there's actually this video. Have you ever heard of this YouTuber called Prince EA?
I don't think so.
He did the video where he was quote unquote suing the school system in like that weird kind of rhythm style. He did a video about this whole situation, and he himself is black as well, and he did this whole video on it, and he was talking about the whole barber and police comparison too. And then one of the things he did in it was at the very end he said imagine if it was the other way around, and if it was you being on the end of the being on the other end of the end of the abuse. You know, like imagine if you were being assaulted by a cop based off of the color of your skin.
Yeah.
The world's a dark place at the moment, and I think.
Then again, he has this one video. Can we autocorrect humanity?
Yeah. The world is a really dark place, and I think we need to spend some time trying. The world's always going to be a dark place. There's no stopping that. The world is always going to be mean, cruel, and nasty. But that doesn't mean we have to be cruel, mean, and nasty. An endless cycle of hatred isn't going to solve anything. We need to actually be open to having conversations with one another. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I began this whole podcast to begin with, so I can actually learn and understand from others, and understand their point of view. Just because the world is a mean, nasty, cruel place doesn't mean that we have to become part of that system and just continue it. And I don't have to be mean to someone I see on the streets, especially homelessness isn't that much of a problem where I live, but homelessness is a problem in general around the world, I think. So here's something I've been guilty of it as well. I think it's called bystander syndrome, where you see a homeless person on the street and you go, man, that's terrible, but you walk by them every single day of your life, and you just don't pay attention to them. But the thing
Oh
is,
yeah.
I want to one day just be able to sit I want to be able to sit where these homeless people are. Maybe buy them some food if they really need it. Like, if they're like desperately hungry and shit. At the same time, I want to sit there and actually have a conversation with them, because while people are out there on the street seeing them and they actually do get to experience human contact, I don't think a lot of people actually take a moment to sit down and talk to these people. If you know what I mean. Like, no one takes a moment to sit down and talk and have a conversation with a homeless person because, oh, my day is so busy, I have to go out and do this, that, and the other. And no one actually wants to have a meaningful conversation with someone. Hell, some people might even go, oh, that person stinks, so I'm not gonna hang around some kind of stinky hobo and shit like that.
Yeah.
Do you have anything in particular that you want to talk about in this podcast? Because we're about almost 30 minutes in now.
Oh wow. Jeez, really?
Yeah, time flies
Wow,
by. Yeah.
I don't think there's too much.
Are there any issues that you'd want to focus on?
I think we pretty much talked about everything I was thinking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Another issue I kind of see is that there's a lot of people who think religion is the source of violence, or there's a lot of people out there. I mean, famous quote from Karl Marx: "Religion is the opiate of the masses." There's a lot of people out there who are very, very cynical about life, and they wanna condemn people who are religious. I mean, they perfectly have a right to believe in whatever they want to believe in. If you don't want to believe in a religion, if you want to be an atheist, agnostic, and whatnot, you have the complete right to, and I will defend your right to believe in that. What I will not defend, however, is the incessant need to go over to someone who is religious and say, your stuff is bullshit, and shit like that. It's just, religion isn't really a source of violence, in my opinion.
Some people use it to, like, find comfort in certain situations.
Yeah. And, there are violent people that use religion for power and terrible stuff. But that doesn't mean that the religion itself is terrible. People... I think a common thing that happens in America, a common prejudice, especially because of, stuff like 9/11 or even, ISIS, for instance. Remember when that was always talked about in the news, and how ISIS was going to take over the world?
Everyone was worried about that.
I think a lot of people use stuff like that as a way to be intolerant to someone's faith and say, they're going to be violent, they're going to do exactly that. And you do find that oftentimes there is a bunch of Muslim communities in America that do get that kind of prejudice, that do get that kind of targeting towards them. Because well, to an ignorant person's understanding, their religious beliefs incite violence, when in fact, Islam is one of the religions that's supposed to be talking about peace, and helping one another and stuff like that. I think a common message that is brought upon throughout a lot of religion is to treat others as you would yourself. That's the golden rule of Christianity, which is just to treat one another as you would yourself. It goes all the way back to the book of Leviticus. So even the Hebrews had this rule to treat your neighbor like you would yourself. It's I think it's Leviticus 18:19, and it says, "Thou shalt treat your neighbor like you would yourself, for I am your Lord God." And
Yeah.
a lot of people also forget that, especially okay. We're in what's called the Pride Month, right?
Yep.
So people think you get people out there who misquote or cherry pick quotes from the Bible to say why being gay is wrong.
Yep.
But just because they do that, just because they cherry pick the Bible to further push their own agenda, who knows? Maybe because they just don't like two dudes kissing or two girls kissing and shit like that. So they just cherry pick it, right? But just because they cherry pick it, and just because they use that as a source of being violent to people in the LGBT community, doesn't mean that all of Christianity is like that either. In fact,
Yeah.
I've met plenty of Christians who have openly, accepted their friends who are gay and so on. They don't care. They're just friends with them because, well, they're cool people to be around. I met a person on a Catholic server actually. He was a devout Catholic. I don't know where he is nowadays, but hey, if you're listening, hello. Anyway, he's a devout Catholic. I did a Hail Mary with him once before on the Discord server that I was in, and
I forgot what that was again.
a Hail Mary is just a kind of prayer where it's like Hail Mary, Hail Mary, Hail Mary, Mother of Grace, and shit like that.
Yeah.
I'm not a Catholic, so I don't know the quote I don't know the Hail Mary off by heart. I only know that first part. And essentially, what he told me was that he himself was gay, and he talked to his priest about it, and his priest accepted him for it. He said, "It's fine," and the guy even had a boyfriend for fuck's sake, and you wouldn't expect a Catholic to be gay or to have a boyfriend, but here he was, just being himself, talking to me about all of this, and then come to find out, while I was on that Discord server, there was a lot of hatred towards being gay. People kept hating on being gay for like no reason, because they kept saying stuff like it wasn't stuff like it's against the Bible. They kept saying that being gay went against the church, when I've studied Christianity through basically through most of my high school life, and not once had I actually ever seen the Bible or the church teach that being gay is wrong. People misinterpret a lot of Paul's letters, Pauline epistles, as they're otherwise known. Paul vehemently was anti-gay in the sense that he didn't say it was wrong straight up, because you have to understand at the time as well. He was preaching to Greek. He was preaching to Greek people. It's fine. He was preaching to a lot of Greek people. He was preaching to I forgot the term. Anyway, he was preaching to those kinds of people, and a very common practice among those times were that the thing that is stereotypically found amongst the view of the Catholic Church is that priests go for little boys, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the thing is, while that does happen, and that is an issue, that was an issue even in the time of Paul. Paul wasn't writing about how it was wrong to be gay. No, this is my interpretation as well. Bear in mind, Paul was not teaching that it was wrong to be gay. What he was teaching was that it was wrong to fuck little boys. Because that was a common practice back then.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people misinterpret that and use Pauline scripture to say, this is why it's wrong to be gay. This is biblical. It's gospel truth. When it's not, you know. And anyway, the point I'm trying to say is, the guy was driven out of the Discord server. He left because he kept getting, because, you know, they weren't attacking him directly, but they were attacking the idea that it was okay to be gay.
Ah.
So he ended up leaving because, well, I mean, if I'm being perfectly honest, I probably would have left as well if people were saying it was wrong to be gay and I was a gay man. You know? So, you know, it's just, there's a lot of hatred out there in the world today, and it's always existed. But I think because we live in this age where everything can finally get documented through, you know, because we have access to smartphones, because we have access to the internet, especially in a modern Western society, we always try to address this kind of issue of hatred in our own ways. You know, people also say that being a social justice warrior is you know, terrible, because, you know, the whole idea of being a social justice warrior is that you attack and condemn others who go against your opinion, that people who aren't politically correct. But the whole idea of a social justice warrior being a social justice warrior is that they're fighting for, well, social justice. They're fighting for, you know.
And unfortunately, just like the police, there have been so many negative incidents.
Yeah.
They've gotten to the point where people are just like
represented.
Yeah, they're misrepresented.
Yeah, you see.
You know, with YouTube, SJW triggered compilation 25 from 2016.
Yeah, because, you know, at that time, I was adamantly against people who called themselves social justice warriors because of that view, because people were telling me, you know, from the internet, from these videos, you know, because people were telling me these things and saying, look at that, that's what social justice warriors are. That is what social justice is all about. It made me actively hate them. It made me hate the idea of social justice, because the stereotypical view was triggered SJW attacks conservative person and shit like that. And now I want to sit here and say that my podcast is open to everyone. Even politically, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you are. It doesn't matter if you're on the right wing, on the left wing, or whatever kind of political label you put yourself on. Put upon yourself. My podcast is open to all, and especially if you want to be part of my podcast, it's also open to those who want to talk on my podcast too. So, you know, it's just the whole idea that people want to sit there and say that this side is wrong. This side is wrong because this side is wrong because they did X, Y, and Z, or that
and
side is
wrong. You have the
creators
that say, like, oh, if you're this person with this views, I don't want you to support me, or I don't want you to be my fan. Like, what do you even mean by that? How are you gonna do that?
Exactly. You know,
I'm sure they're so hurt.
And, you know, there are a lot of people out there who want to say, I can understand the idea of a safe space for people.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I don't necessarily think that the belief of this is my safe space and you can't touch me really kind of exists, but I think in my opinion what a safe space is is exactly what I'm doing right now. This is my safe space to actually talk about these things. This is a safe space, regardless of race, religion, sex, political views, and whatnot.
A lot of people think a safe space is a echo chamber.
Oh yeah, yeah. Difference between a safe space and an echo chamber is an echo chamber is just people who want to hear their own views echoed throughout the area. You know, a lot of groups on Twitter who talk about issues like any kind of issues. You know, oh, this person did a mean, terrible, bad thing, and then the other person will like they follow others who say, yeah, that person's mean and terrible, and they say, see, others think like me, therefore I'm right. And you know, that's what an echo chamber is all about. But you know, it's just we always see in the mainstream media some form of negative representation of whatever kind of political belief, race, religion, or sex. Especially with the idea of feminism, we see that a lot of what's reported in the mass media are people who I personally would not classify as feminists because they're not fighting for equality between both sexes. What they want is for men to be oppressed and women to be on the top. And that's not what feminism is. That's misandry. I can understand I can understand why these kinds of people might have a hatred for men, but I mean, it's like here in the Western society, we pretty much do have equality between both sexes, and I think we should keep it that way. I think we should definitely have that equality between both sexes, because it doesn't matter if you're born female or male, or even if you transition between either one of them. It doesn't really matter what you identify as, so long as you're treated equally and fairly. What I do have a problem with is when you try to go about it through a violent way. You know, the suffrage. Honestly, I probably shouldn't get too much into detail about that, because I don't know enough about the suffragettes to actually make a point about it. But yeah, they basically they fought for women's rights to vote, and eventually they got it. I don't know how I don't remember how they went about it. I think there were a couple hunger strikes and stuff like that, and you know, it worked.
Yep.
So yeah, what this whole topic boils down to, what the whole topic of this podcast boils down to is we need to learn how not to hate one another. But at the same time, with the riots happening and all of this, you can't just tell that person, or to tell these people who in their eyes had been oppressed for years, and pretty much still are, you know, because of racial profiling and stuff. It's easy for me to sit here and say, don't hate, love. But I mean, I don't know what they're going through. I don't know what it's like to be in that situation. So I can't sit here as an outsider looking in saying, don't hate those people, because I don't know why they feel hate. I don't know enough about their situation to tell them not to hate. And I think anger is justified. There's a distinct difference between anger and hatred. hatred makes you go blind, makes you blind. Hatred is just blind fury. You want to destroy something because revenge or shit like that. Anger is a natural human emotion. It's what makes us human. So naturally, you have a right to feel angry toward the situation you are in. I'm not telling people not to feel angry. I'm not telling people not to, go out there and not protest, because hell, I'd join in on those protests. I totally would. It's
Watch.
it's one of those things where it's like you have to understand the situation that they've been put through. And personally, I can't understand. As someone who lives in a different country, far away from all this violence, who only sees all this violence on the news, who lives in a middle-class family and is white, I don't understand what these people are going through. And I never will. I have family that is in the the working class, and they do their best to get the things that I have in their lives, but they themselves are also white. So it's really it's impossible for me to understand what their situation is going through. But that does not mean that I can't sympathize with them, help them out through what they are going through. And that's another reason why I do these podcasts, is to help people go through and help people out through what they're going through. There's actually I forget the person who made it, but there's this amazing rap song called "I'm Not a Racist." Oh, and you have this white guy who is in the stereotypical "Make America Great Again" stuff. Seen as one of those kinds of people. And
Joe or Lucas.
Yeah, him. And you have this white guy talking to this black guy, dropping a certain word that we do not use. And then you have the black guy also talking to the white guy, giving his side of the story. And I think the last line is, why reopen old scars when you could be a Band-Aid, or something like that. And the two of them hug it out.
Mm-hmm.
I'll leave a link to that one in my description as well. Anyway, I'm gonna see how long we've actually been talking for the. Oh, it's about 48 minutes. I think we should probably end it here and now, because I'm just gonna end up going on a tangent and repeating the same points. So this is.
Yeah. No. Yeah, we have other things to do.
Yeah. Anyway.
As fun as it is.
Yeah. Thank you to all my listeners of this podcast. Remember to leave a like on this video if you enjoy this, or leave a dislike if you don't like it. And leave a comment if you feel obliged to talk about these issues, and talk about these issues with me in the comment section. I try my best to reply to these comments that I get. And remember, you're not alone with what you're going through. I think a big thing that we as humans need to do, or a big thing that is important for humans, is communication. So remember to always talk to someone if you need to talk to someone. So I'm going to end the podcast here. I'm not going to put my outro music in it. Same reason why I didn't put my intro music in. And just live life, breathe air. I know somehow we're gonna get there. But just live your life how you want to live your life, and treat others how you want to be treated. I'll see you guys on the next episode.